today's guest believes they can sell 50,000 copies of their upcoming game, but they've also said that the future of their game dev career rests on this one game and how it does. Now, my guest today also is a prominent Godot instructor, one of the best, and also has amassed a following of 36,000 people on YouTube. Now, that's because my guest today is Jacob of Firebelly Games. We have an incredible chat that I'm excited to share with you, and let's just get you straight into it. Jacob, do you think Godot is the best game engine?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's awesome to be here. Do I think Godot is the best game engine? I don't. I'm generally a very pragmatic person. I don't think that it's helpful to think of like one tool being better than another, because it all depends on like what the context is, right? Like if I were to go to you and say, is a screwdriver better than a fork? You'd be like, that doesn't make any sense, right? It's like they're two different tools for two different contexts, and so Godot is just one of the many tools that you can use to build games, right? You've got everything from just like raw languages if you want to build your own engine to frameworks, which are a little bit lighter weight, but handle some of the tricky stuff for you. Then you've got full-on game engines up to even like something like Roblox, which is very like, like it gives you a lot to work with and expects you to work with a lot. So it's like, is Godot the best game engine? For me, yes. The answer is definitely yes for me. And I think that probably for a lot of people who are in my boat, small teams or small developers who need that right mix of like flexibility, but also having a lot of like out of the box functionality. You don't have to worry about like runtime license fees or anything like that. You can modify the engine. It's fully open source, although I've never found a need to do that myself, mostly because I don't have any C++ skills, but we can leave that one aside. But yeah, so I think, it is certainly the best for a certain set of people, and I think that if you want to discover if you're one of those people, you just have to try it out.
Yeah, a large portion of my audience are hobbyist devs and people making their first game and working solo. And so I think the ones that I think of, are Godot and Unity and Game Maker, and then sometimes maybe Unreal. But when you think about those kind of main four, and maybe Game Maker's not even in the main four, that's just what I use, so that's why I think of it. But maybe for those main three, what does Godot have that people should consider that would make it the right tool for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Personally, I think that the way that Godot expects you to build games with like this node hierarchy makes a lot of intuitive sense to me, especially if you understand like graph theory, which like includes trees and similar data structures. It's very like sensible to know that the scene structure kind of drives everything. It drives like the rendering order, it drives the input handling order. And so just thinking of like your scene as being composed of a bunch of little individual components that add up into something bigger, but have a very clearly defined set of rules in terms of like how Godot works with them. I just think that's a very intuitive thing to do. It's very lightweight. So if you're this kind of people that, you don't want to wait for Unity to boot up, that's another plus that you can't discount. But I think it just goes back to what I said, like the open source nature of it, the fact that there's no fees whatsoever. You can port to all the desktop platforms, mobile. And, if you do need to do console ports, you have to hire, a porting company to do that, but it is totally possible to do it. And like I said, it's just like that right mix of like generalized enough where you're not doing a lot of boilerplate stuff, but it also is flexible that you can make all kinds of interesting games with it. I mean, there's a lot like Slay the Spire 2 just came out and is made in Godot, right? So it's like there's a lot of different things you can do with it. All that said, like I'm not super familiar with Unreal and Unity. Like I don't have enough experience with those to say like here's where Godot is precisely better than those engines. But for me personally, it's like I don't build 3D games, so it's like the 2D features of like Unity and Unreal are like not even in consideration for me. And then you compare Unity's 2D to Godot's 2D. It's like, well, Godot has a dedicated 2D renderer, very easy to set up like pixel perfect games in it, which is the kind of games that I make. So it just makes sense all around for my use case from like every angle you could come at it from.
Hey, Blake here. I just wanted to interrupt this episode for a moment to let you know that you can now support me making this podcast to make sure it sticks around. So we are doing this in the Patreon style, but not on Patreon. We are using Discord channel memberships. So if you didn't know, the Discord has already been up and running and offering lots of good, cool, free stuff to do and a great community. But now you can support at the $5 tier if you just want to give a little to make sure that this podcast continues to grow. That also will get you access to a few behind the scenes looks. But then also, if you want a little more bang for your buck, I have a $15 supporter tier, and that gets you access to a monthly ticketed event with a guest speaker / Q&A. So it'll be like a presentation / Q&A. And I'm excited to announce that our next speaker for June, coming up on June 23rd, is the one and only Aramis, creator of a game about fleeting a black hole, Hexagod, and Chess Survivors, and honestly, one of my favorite YouTubers for many years now. So I'm really excited. You can join the Discord or leave me a comment if you have any questions. And thank you for anyone who decides to support. It really means the world. This has been an incredible journey creating and getting this podcast off the ground. So thanks for listening, and let's get you back to this great episode with Firebelly. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that for people to consider that, are thinking about what engine they should use, or, there's some people that are just like the chronic engine hopper and are always trying things out. But just to back up for just a little bit here to frame the conversation, I wanted to start with Godot because when I told my Discord that you were coming on, I just asked them, like, what's like the main thing you think about when you hear about Firebelly? And a lot of people mentioned, one, some of your games, especially Alchemortis, which we are going to spend some time talking about. But a lot of people mentioned that you're one of the go-to kind of teachers in the Godot space. So how did you become like a Godot tutorial person?
Well, I think I've always enjoyed making tutorial content. Actually, like when I was in high school, me and my best friend, we had a tutorial channel where we weren't teaching game development, but we were teaching like how to do things in Sony Vegas, which is a video editor, and here's how to do things in Photoshop and stuff. And that channel actually did really well. But I've always enjoyed like teaching when I can and when I have something to teach. And so I started using Godot back in 2017, which was the 3.0 alpha days. So we're on Godot 4.6 now, almost 4.7. And so this was 3.0 alpha. This is like one of the first major updates for Godot. And when I started using it, there was a dearth of content online, like tutorial content, learning resources. There was some stuff, but largely if you wanted to do anything complex in the engine, there was just like nothing available. And so the way that I learned how to use Godot is I just kind of trial by fire, just tried to build things, hit a wall, didn't find any resources on how to get around that wall, and just basically had to figure it out myself. But then once I started learning those things, and once I started learning the quirks of the Godot engine and how to effectively build games with it, I saw that there was an opportunity that, I have all this knowledge built up. I did all the hard work of figuring out all this stuff, so I can make life a little bit easier for someone else and just make some tutorial content, And so that's how I got into it. I just saw that there was a lack of resources, especially when I started using Godot. And I just said, well, that's a gap that needs to be filled, and I could fill that. So that's what I'll do.
Yeah, well, thank you for stepping into that gap, especially in a, like a post Unity runtime fees age. It's so nice to have an open source project that's just really been supported and picked up by the community. And you're one of those people that have carried that torch. So thank you for that. What would you say are the ingredients that are needed to make a good tutorial for someone?
Yes, the number one ingredient is you need to know what you're talking about. I mean, that's like the obvious thing, but the reason I bring it up is because I do see a lot of tutorials on the internet where it's obvious that the person is like 2 months into learning the engine, and the first thing that they learned is like, I'm going to make a tutorial for other people. And it's like, I appreciate the sentiment behind that, but at the same time, like, I think everyone would be better off if like you had a healthy amount of experience before you started saying like, here's how to do this thing. So that is the number one thing. Like I personally, like I try not to teach anything until I'm like very confident that like I could defend myself against a wave of like hate comments about like, why are you doing it this way? You know what I mean? I'm being dramatic, but like I should be able to defend and articulate the reason why I did the thing in a sophisticated manner. In a way that demonstrates and shows that I've actually considered all the options, and here's why this is good, a good way to approach this particular thing or that particular thing. So that's number one. I think being concise, being brief is very important. There's a lot of tutorials, again, that I see where, there's a lot of, I don't want to necessarily say rambling, but there's a lot of fat that could be cut from the presentation of the tutorial. So like my Udemy courses, which I have several of, I try to make every single lesson like 15 to 20 minutes, and it just like covers one thing. Like, here's what we're doing in this lesson. It's 15 minutes. It's as streamlined as it possibly can be while also being as helpful as it can be. And I find that people really like that presentation style because like the lessons are short enough where if you've got a limited amount of time in a day, you can just sit down and do one lesson. And you walk away from that lesson feeling like you learned something complete. Like, even though it's part of a larger building of a game, there's like a very specific skill that you've learned in that lesson. And that's what I try to do for like my standalone tutorial videos as well, is like not make them so long, like get to the point, give people the information that they need, reinforce it a little bit, and then that's it. That's all you need to do. So yeah, those are the big things. Like, you got to know what you're talking about, present the information in a streamlined way that's still descriptive enough. And, and then there's other things like make sure audio quality is good, make sure the text on the screen is big enough, like basic things like that. But those are more like, presentation details.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad you brought up these Udemy courses because a lot of people mentioned these as well whenever I was, asking about you in my Discord. And I just wanted to get your take on building courses as kind of a viable maybe piece of sort of how you become a full-time developer. I know that you worked on Gunforge full-time and that you're now working on Alchemortis full-time. And yeah, as much as you're comfortable sharing, is the Udemy courses like a kind of important piece of that, or just should people consider doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's one of those things where I don't think you're gonna be super successful if you, like I said, if you don't have anything to teach or if you don't know what you're talking about. But at the same time, like, it does require, like, making a course requires a bunch of different things beyond just like enjoying teaching. Like, you have to come up with a plan for it. You have to, you have to record and edit. I think my longest course is like 20 hours of video content. So it's like you got to watch back every minute of that video content and edit it. And sometimes you'll find out that you messed up a lesson and you have to go back and re-record it, So it's kind of tedious. It's not super fun to do. It's definitely not for everyone. And on top of that, you have to respond to the Q&A. Like, students will have questions. So you got to make sure that you're available to respond to those. I made sure to do that very regularly when my course is like first released to like populate the Q&A with like common questions so that students down the road would be able to see the recorded conversations. So yeah, it's definitely viable, but I think I was lucky a couple of times with it because, I think I created one of the first like big Godot courses back in the, 3 point, I forgot what version it was, but it was one of the 3.x versions, and it was a platformer course, and there weren't many Godot courses on Udemy at that time. So like, again, I was filling a gap in the market essentially. And then my other course I released right when Godot 4.0 came out. So I capitalized on like that wave of interest in the Godot engine. And then the Unity runtime fiasco happened and I saw a huge spike in sales there, but I already had established courses. So like when people search Godot, like they show up first on Udemy, right? So I think, it's hard for me to say, like, is it viable for everyone? Because it's like, I did hit a couple of lucky beats there where my revenue was higher than otherwise would have been. And it was definitely a part of like helping me like sustain, my income while I'm building games. Unfortunately, that's less of the case now. I've kind of neglected my courses because I've been so busy with Alchemortis that the revenue is like steadily going down month over month. And I think that's because like Udemy is hitting me for like not updating the courses and not, responding to comments or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like you have to make sacrifices, right? You have to decide what your time is going to be spent on. But yeah, I don't know if it's viable for everyone. I think if you have a talent for teaching, if you like teaching and you can deal with the tedium of like editing together hours of video content, then, you really have nothing to lose. It doesn't cost you anything to put something on Udemy. So the only thing you have to lose is time. So might as well try it.
Yeah, and two just quick takeaways that I'm hearing from you there as I think about that is, one, just can you identify a gap? So if you're creating courses that already exist, probably not going to get those sales. It sounds like that was a really key part for you. But then also just keeping in mind that it's not like purely passive income. Like if you
Yeah.
really want it to be a core part, you need to consider supporting it, Q&A for people,
Yeah.
updates semi-regularly. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm also curious, just in the nature of tutorial content, if you feel like you've seen any shift in that with kind of the rise of LLMs where, it's very different that I can now go to ChatGPT and ask it a question about Godot. That's very different than it was even just a few years ago. So do you feel like that's changing the landscape? Does it change at all how you're thinking about tutorials?
Yeah, one of my first recommendations to people is like, yeah, use the LLMs as an interactive rubber duck. Like, that's going to beat like going to Reddit and getting downvoted because the question's been asked a million times before, right? And plus you're going to get an instant answer. So it's like, you know, I know there are mixed opinions on like the AI LLM stuff, but as a learning tool, it's incredibly powerful. And so if, I use it sometimes to like, I don't understand an algorithm. So like, can you like walk through how this algorithm is working like line by line? And, you know, if I have a question, it's like having almost like a professor right by your side where you can just have a conversation with it to understand things. So LLMs are very powerful learning tools. As far as like how they've impacted like the course stuff, I don't know. Like I haven't been paying attention to that very much. I think Udemy is doing some stuff with like AI assisted learning or something like that. But um yeah, I really don't have any sense for like if or how much that is impacting like tutorial content. So yeah, I wish I could answer that better, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And you're kind of creating for me now a little bit of a mental model because the other tutorial, let's say just, kind of pillar of the community, I interviewed Code Monkey, and he
Hmm.
said kind of a very similar take on LLMs. He's like, it's a fantastic tool if you use it wisely and you use it, yeah, as a rubber duck and not just a generation machine. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm paying attention to what the teaching people in the space are saying, and we'll be keeping that in mind. So thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that. Um, Sticking in the tutorial world for just a little bit longer, I
Yeah, for sure.
also let my Discord ask submit questions, and Connor wanted to know what is one technique or skill in Godot that you think is important to learn but that is overlooked.
Yeah, so I think the big thing is kind of calling back to what I mentioned earlier, which is that you really want to learn how to work with and not against Godot's scene tree. And what that means is like learn how to leverage the scene tree for like your rendering order, your input handling order. And that's kind of like maybe the main thing that I would recommend is like because I know from my learning experience when I was first learning Godot is like the input system and how the input events are like propagated through the scene tree was incredibly confusing. And then you end up in these situations where you're not handling input in the proper state, or it like gets handled at this node that's like way down the tree and you wanted it to be handled up here. And there's all kinds of things like that in Godot where like if you're not working with how the scene tree, like if you're not working with the flow of the scene tree, for lack of a better word, and you're fighting against it, you're going to end up in these like spaghetti situations where you're like trying to do all this stuff to work around how the scene tree wants to do things and how Godot wants to do things. So like the best thing you could do is like invest time in like understanding like how is Godot actually propagating things throughout the tree, right? How does the life cycles of like input events work, or like function calls, like when does ready get called, and like do the export variables get resolved before or after ready, right? It's like obviously I know the answers to all these things, but I'm just saying like really understanding the internals of like what order Godot does things in and having a great model of how all those things works enables you to make your own scenes that plug very nicely into that. And then you don't have to spend so much time fighting the systems. You can instead like work with them. So yeah, just like get a good understanding, an intimate understanding of like how everything works in the scene tree, the life cycle of everything, all the events and stuff, and try to work with them is it would be my advice.
And what's the best way for someone to do that? Is there like a documentation they should read, or do you have a video on this? What's the best place for someone to go if they want to take your advice?
This would be a good video, but I don't have a video. I think the documentation is really good, especially the input handling documentation. Like, just I've read that input handling documentation so many times because there's a bunch to it. There's a lot to it, but the Godot documentation is great, but even just doing your own experimentation, right? Like if you have a question, like what I just brought up, like are export variables set before ready or after ready, whatever. Like I'll do this all the time. I'll just set up a test scene with the condition that I want to observe, and I'll just see what happens. And that's how I built a lot of my knowledge about Godot, especially when there wasn't a whole lot of tutorial content out there. So yeah, just experiment when you're ever not quite sure how Godot is doing things or what order it's doing it. Just set up like a contrived test case to figure that out. If the documentation doesn't have that answer already um, described for you.
Okay, yeah, very cool. Love the idea of experimentation, and I'll try to link that documentation for the input handling below for anyone that wants to. I'll save you a few clicks. So
Yeah.
all right, yeah, thanks for talking tutorials. I would love to shift the conversation a little bit to more maybe dev/design side. Let's start with some of your early Steam games. I was really fascinated to click in and look at your Steam profile and realize that you're working on your 5th game. So starting with just those couple early ones, when I look at your Steam account, I see the first 3 games, you released them pretty closely together. You had Cryptographer in 2019, Swordslinger in 2020, and then Mirrored Pawns in 2021. So 3 years, 3 games. What do you remember about that season of life as a developer in those early games?
Yeah, so that was, like what? The first game I released on Steam was 2 years after I started using Godot. Yeah, I mean, that was just really a time of experimentation, right? Like just figuring out a lot of unknowns. Launching to Steam was not so much an exercise of making money. It was more so like, I don't know how this works, so I'm gonna figure it out, right? And yeah, that was just kind of like, I was building really small games. I was trying to find things that weren't too hard to accomplish that I could throw up and just see how they did. I didn't really put a whole lot of effort into like marketing them. I didn't really put a whole lot of effort into them individually, to be honest. Like I just made the game good enough and threw it up on Steam, and I learned a bunch from that. Cryptographer specifically, I've been doing a lot of game jams for a while too. So like I have dozens of games on my itch.io page that are free that are part of game jams. But Cryptographer was originally a game jam game that did really well in the Ludum Dare. I think it was like I don't want to like misremember this, but it was like top 10 or top 20 overall in one of the Ludum Dares. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to make this into a full game and throw it up on Steam. And um, yeah, I mean, I think Mirrored Pawns, that one specifically, that was a game where I mostly just wanted to get a YouTube video out of it. It was I'm making a commercial game in 1 week, and so I just made a game in 1 week and put it up on Steam and said, hey, it's a commercial game now. And then Swordslinger, I don't remember why I made that one. I think that was just, again, just part of some like experimentation learning. I think Swordslinger is like the start of where you see me like trying to implement systems that drive the game rather than having like well-defined mechanics. And Gunforged like kind of learned from that, and I did that. And now Alchemortis is like systems galore, which we could talk about later. But yeah, I don't remember a whole lot from that period of time. That was a long time ago now. I mean, 2019, 7 years ago, right? But
Yeah,
I think
and you've maybe already sort of answered this just in kind of your mindset of experimentation, but all 3 of those games were under 10 reviews, and so
yeah.
certainly not like a financial success, so to speak. There's many ways to define success, but yeah, just what kept you motivated in that time when your games weren't like selling a lot, and maybe it's really just that mindset. But anything to add when I asked that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. I can't answer why did I stick with it. I guess mostly because like it was just learning experiences. Like I said, I guess I wasn't seriously invested in these games making money. I didn't have any like delusions that these games were going to be like the next big indie hit. I was mostly, I guess I was just mostly seeing like curiosity, like how would these do? Like how would this do as a game if I charge a couple bucks for it or whatever? And the answer is not well, but that's okay because it's, you learn what not to do, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's maybe, would you agree with this statement that maybe you approach game dev from a sort of almost scientific view? Like, I think of a lot of people in the community, in that I hear about, they're like very much how to say this, like it's all about just sort of this big dream and the creative passion and investing everything, and it almost sort of becomes a part of their identity. But one thing I'm hearing that is maybe a valuable piece that you're doing is you're approaching these more like experiments than like maybe a part of your personality or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I'm like I said, I'm a very pragmatic person generally. I tend not to get carried away with like big dreams or big ideals. I just kind of focus on the next thing, and mostly the reason I do anything is just because I'm interested in it. The reason I make games is not necessarily because I'm trying to make a bunch of money. It's just mostly because it's like, oh, this is cool. Like this system that I built is really cool, or like I kind of like how this idea works and how it's presented in this game or whatever. So yeah, I mostly just like it's I don't know how to describe it other than it just interests me and I'm learning stuff constantly. And I think maybe that's really what it is. It's like the constant engagement of like learning new things over time. It just makes it constantly interesting and there's always something new coming up. There's always something new to learn. And that's really what keeps me invested, honestly. It's like it's just a fun experience overall. There's so many different skills to master and it's like it's almost never ending. But I kind of like that because it's like I don't know what's going to happen next year. I don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now. It's like I could be like so much more skilled 5 years from now than where I am now, and that kind of keeps me going.
Yeah, it's that endless frontier of discovery and like infinite growth, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's really exciting. Now another place this part of the conversation is taking my brain that I'm really curious to hear from you on is I've been kind of asking this question to different devs, not all of them, but asking where do you lie on the spectrum of, I usually say biz dev versus artist, and I'm kind of meaning like the biz dev is like fully focused on like I got to pick the perfect genre to maximize my money, and I'm really solving for making money, and then spectrum all the way to the other side, the artist just says I have an idea. I don't care if people are going to like it. I might spend 7 years on it, but it's sounding like to me that you're maybe there's like a third part of this. Like I'm just wondering what you think about yourself whenever I kind of set it up like that. Do you feel like you fit into that spectrum?
Um, I would say not until recently, and I think that's actually a fault. I think it was actually wrong of me not to focus at least something on both of those, right? Like is this presentation going to be appealing? And also, does this have a place in the market? I was mostly just like, hey, this is a cool game. I'm just going to choose an art style and it's just going to be in whatever genre I happen to be enjoying at the moment. And like, there you go. Right. And it was just like haphazard is the way I would describe it. Like, I didn't really actually put that much thought into like the planning stages of the game. I just kind of like had an idea, thought it would, I think mostly I was just driven by like, would this be a fun system to build? Because I'm a programmer. I was a software engineer before I went full time. I've always just liked building systems. And so if I find a game that just has like a fun system to build, like I'll just kind of jump on that. But that is something that I changed with Alchemortis. Like I actually did make a conscious effort to like, okay, if I'm going to invest in this game, like, is it going to be going in a market? Is it like, does it have market fit? Like, is it going to be something that could sell well? And also, what is the fantasy that I'm selling to the player? What experience am I trying to give the player? Because one of the things I learned from Gunforge, which was really like surprising to me, but it was like, I'll never forget it, is that so many people commented that they didn't like the main character. And I was just like baffled by that because like for
Interesting.
context in Gunforged, you play as like this old man and you just kill a bunch of random entities like they're just, haphazard again. But people said, I don't want to play as an old man. Like, why would I want to play as him? I'm like, there's no backstory. There's no lore. There's no nothing. It's just a character that you control in a twin stick shooter. But I learned like actually the fantasy that you're selling to people, the fantasy that you're creating for people is actually a really important part of the game. And something as simple as like having an unappealing character will turn so many people off. And so I made a conscious effort to be more along that spectrum, like you said. So I would say like it's kind of half and half. Like I had a clear idea of what I wanted to do. I also like wanted to make sure it fit into a market and also wanted to make sure that I was presenting it visually and with a theme that would be appealing, like on a Steam page or just as a general experience.
Yeah, and I mean, it just comes back to, one of the great creators of the space, Jonas Tyroller. He's teaching us all that fantasy is like this key pillar. For anyone that hasn't, watched his videos, he's really like, when I interviewed him, he's like, basically, I can make anything fun, but you need to build a fantasy around it. And it sounds like that's sort of what you experienced. Now, you mentioned Gunforge there, so I would love to kind of shift to ask you a couple of questions about that. And you kind of, yeah, you gave us the pitch of the old guy. You're shooting things haphazardly.
Yeah.
Anything else to add about just what is Gunforged?
Yeah, it's a twin stick shooter with it's kind of like Brotato like combat, but the kind of hook of the game is that you've got like a Noita inspired gun crafting system. So you can put in a bunch of runes to your weapons and that changes like what projectiles you shoot and like how they behave. And then you've got, of course, like passives, one of 3 passives you can choose after every wave, and you kind of like create this build. And then the fun of the game is you just kind of like make numbers go up and just like slaughter a bunch of things, right? So it's, but it's just like a roguelike twin stick shooter. It's kind of like, and it didn't really have a strong theme. It's just kind of there. Um, so yeah, but that's what the game is about.
Yeah, other than this idea of fantasy, is there anything else you learned from working on Gunforge that you're taking into Alchemortis?
Yeah, I mean, playtesting is really important. I'm actually, I'm on my 5th playtest for Alchemortis now, and I don't even think, I mean, maybe I did one playtest for Gunforged, and the results are like night and day. Like Gunforged had so many problems that had I done playtesting and had I been invested in like addressing all the feedback, Gunforged would have been a much, much, much better game than it is. But I kind of didn't do that, and then it suffered for it. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing too is the theme thing. Like you have to have a strong theme. You have to have a strong art style. That doesn't mean it has to be sophisticated or like hard to create, but it does have to be like a strong vision, right?
Yeah, and when I was doing my research on Gunforge, I'm really hoping I'm not mixing you up with the other person I did research for, but I think shortly after you launched Gunforge, you posted like a revenue video and you made a little over 10K
Yeah.
after the short time. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
So just with that in mind, with that amount of did you consider the game a success, and do you consider the game a success today?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, having not sold more than like a couple dozen copies of a game on Steam, to going like Gunforge now has like over 4,000 copies sold. So that's a huge success, right? To go from basically zero to in the thousands is like that was kind of like a I don't know what you want to call it, like a proof of concept, right? It was like, but for me, like I actually do have some of the skills required to make a commercially successful game, right? So it's like I've got like a light at the end of the tunnel, right? Like if I just keep going in this direction, I take what I learned from the failures and the successes and I just like continue refining my skills and applying those learnings. Like as long as I stay on that trajectory, like I should be able to do better than that, right? So yeah, I would say it was a success. Like it proved that I could make a game that sold a decent amount of copies, that people would enjoy and play, and it's got very positive reviews too, which I'm kind of surprised by, honestly. But like, I just have so much more confidence now in Alchemortis because I know that Alchemortis is a better game, and I know that people are going to like it more than Gunforge, and so like that just, it's just an extra motivator, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's some real exponential growth to go from singular digit copies to such a success with Gunforge. So
Yeah,
congrats on that. And yeah,
thank you.
and I think that's a great time to start talking about Alchemortis, which will be kind of the bulk of our conversation here. I guess to start, I watched one of your videos and you're setting an ambitious goal for this one of 50,000 copies sold. Now
Yeah.
I know you think it's a lot better game than Gunforge, but how are you feeling about your confidence level of hitting that 50K copies?
Well, I won't say that I'm like absolutely confident in that, but I mean, you think about it like, can I do roughly 12 times the number of copies that Gunforge sold? And it's like, I think so. Like, I think, you know, I don't know, maybe the auto battler genre is starting to get a little saturated now, but I still think there's room for like new auto battler games. It's got a really strong theme. I mean, the earliest bits of feedback that I got when I started showing Alchemortis on my YouTube channel was like, oh, the art style is amazing. Like, I love the art style. Like, this is such a cool world. People have been asking me for like lore. Like, what's the lore of this game? Like, people are invested in it, right? And so it's got a much stronger theme, much stronger visual hook. And then of all the playtests I've run, like people are getting hooked on it, especially this last playtest. I have some playtesters that have over 50 hours of playtime in just the playtest version. And so like all the pieces are there, right? And now it's just a matter of like executing, like bringing it to release with all of the issues fixed, tons of content. I think if I can just stay on the course I'm on, where the game is getting incrementally better over time, I think that is definitely a doable goal. I think I'm not going to say like I'm going to hit it for sure, but I think honestly, I think the only thing standing between reaching that goal and not reaching that goal is like how well I execute from now until release. I think that's the main factor that's going to contribute to how good or how bad it does. And so yeah, we will see. But I'm feeling good about it. I'm optimistic about it. I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch, but yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, super exciting. You're feeling good. All right, we've got people excited with the 50K copy goal. But so let's
Yep.
step back for a minute. You know, you mentioned that in your approach to this game, you're wanting to put on a little bit more of that biz dev lens, kind of spend some time thinking about what will be successful. So can you take me back to what you remember about that early stage of Alchemortis, you know, before it had a name? How were you considering what you were going to make next after Gunforged?
Yeah, so like I said, I always liked making games with like sophisticated systems. Like I want to build like the programming framework for these systems where you can get all this like emergent gameplay where the game is like very hands off in terms of like what you can do, and it's just like the systems that set the general rules. And so I knew I wanted to continue along that path because I just enjoy making games like that. And I kind of honestly, I kind of like stumbled a little bit into the art style, in the theme, because I like the whole idea of necromancers. Whenever I play an RPG, if it doesn't have a necromancer class, I don't play it. It's like, and so I just figured, well, I already have like a penchant for this kind of like visual style, so. And I had been playing the Bazaar at the time and a couple other auto battlers, and I was like, these are kind of fun. I don't like the PvP nature of them though, so I'm going to make it a single player roguelike. So all these pieces kind of like came together in an amorphous way, just kind of like, oh, it'd be cool to make a necromancer themed auto battler. And then I was thinking, well, what would the complex system be? Like what would the sophisticated system be? And that's how I came up with the alchemy system, which is basically a system where you can take your items, each have abilities, and you can just like mix and match the abilities to create like new items, basically. So you can, take an ability off one thing, put it on another, and then that might synergize really well with your build now because like you hit the right combination of things. But yeah, that just kind of like that all came together in the early days over time, and I just kind of just kept building on that.
Very cool. Can you tell me a little bit more about kind of the structure of how you're doing the alchemy system? Is it set up in a way where like everything can match with everything, or are there like categories of items, or how does the alchemy system actually work a little bit more in depth?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things. So each item has tags. Those are kind of like the categories that they're slotted into. So you've got like minions and relics and ritual items. And then you might have certain abilities that scale off of tags, or you might have certain abilities that have adjacency bonuses. Like this ability only activates if there's 3 adjacent items of this type. And so the real hook of like the alchemy system comes with like, I have this item that works really well with like this synergy, but I want this ability off this other item on this one, right? And so the alchemy system, like it's RNG to a large extent, where you throw items into the pot and then their abilities get shuffled based on like what abilities were added into the pot. So it kind of like shuffles them around. But then you have these items that I'm calling reagents, which are ways that you can control the alchemical result. So you get these reagents and it might say like, oh, this reagent protects the fire abilities on this item. So that means that, okay, I can lock down the fire abilities and then I can try to like do the RNG pull to get another fire ability on it. And now I'm stacking fire on that item, right? So it's like that's kind of how the alchemy system works. It's still kind of in progress. There's still a couple of things that I'm not happy with about it, but yeah, generally it's kind of like this RNG slot machine with like the dopamine hits when you get that perfect roll, but then you have the element of control over it with the reagents as well. So there's like a strategy element to it in addition to like the slot machine pull kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean it's right up my alley. I'm following along and excited to play
Awesome.
upon release. I'm just curious, how are you Is it just built on such a systems level that it makes it much more manageable? What I'm imagining is that there's just so many outcomes and items that like balancing and even just keeping track of what's going on might be difficult, but is it just that you built the systems in a way that it's not quite that, as intense as creating all these items individually?
No, I'm doing every item individually too. So, the
Impressive.
system is built to, yes, be generic enough where like I have a very strong workflow for like if I add a new item, I can add a new item, I add the art for that item, and then I write like a couple of abilities for that item. And that's all I have to do. And the item, like that just gets propagated through the rest of the system and everything's like systematized so that it just automatically works with Alchemy. Like the Alchemy doesn't make any distinction between what item has what ability. It's just like, it's very generalized. Um, so yeah, it's like yes, the systems are generalized enough where my workflow is like very efficient. I can just add new abilities to a new item and boom, that item's in the game. Then I do it again. Add a new item with new abilities, it's in the game. And so you just end up with this essentially pool of hundreds of abilities that you can just encounter during the run. And as far as the balancing goes, yes, there are items that are obviously more powerful than others. But at the same time, like I think the benefit of being a single player roguelike versus a PvP game is that I can tolerate a little bit of imbalance, right? Like I can let players get that ridiculous run every once in a while because I'm not worried about like the other player's experience on the receiving end in like the case of like backpack battles or the bazaar or whatever, right? It's like I can kind of let the power run away sometimes and that's okay. And that can actually be fun and good for a roguelike, right? Because then it's like, oh, I want to do that build again. And then you play some more and like you're constantly chasing that high of like getting that perfect build, right? So I think yeah, I don't think I have as much to worry about with respect to balancing, but it is kind of hard to balance because, like, I mean, my playtesters will come up with combinations that I didn't even think of, and it's like, oh, like that's an easy win button right there that I didn't think of. So that has to that has to be handled somehow. But it's not. I don't feel as much pressure to balance it as I would if I was doing like a PvP game or something.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Are you also adding any sort of rarity system to help you with that, or are all the items of the same rarity?
So I do have a way of controlling the weights of everything in the loot table so I can make certain items less common than others. And I do have a concept of legendary items, which I'm starting to explore a little bit more. But I haven't really done a whole lot with the rarity system, and that's a lever that I have yet to pull in terms of the balancing. Because that may be what I do. I may say, well, I really like how this ability is designed, even though it's powerful, so I'll just make it rarer. So it's like you're not going to get it every run, right? And the other thing too is like I'm at about like half of the content that I expect to have in the game at release. So a certain amount of that a certain amount of the power is going to be diluted as well with just the increasing amount of items. So it's kind of hard. Like I don't want to go overboard and like trying to balance the game perfectly right now and then have that balance like knocked out of whack when there's like 200 more items in the game, right? So I'm just kind of like I'm taking it easy. I'm not spending a whole lot of time focused on the balance, but there are things I can do to make that a smoother experience for players.
Yeah, well, it just sounds so cool. And as a roguelike enjoyer myself, building a system just sounds like the most fun way to build a game. So really, really cool to get to pick your brain on that. Zooming out just a little bit to a little bit more of a big picture, I'm curious just what would you say makes up a good auto battler?
You know what? I wish I could tell you. I haven't played that many auto battlers. So I played the Bazaar for like a couple hours. At most, I haven't played any backpack battles. Actually, I've just watched gameplay of it. So like, I actually don't know. I think from my experience, like what my playtesters have enjoyed from my game is the depth of synergy, I think is the big one, like the depth of strategy. Like there are multiple like different strategic levels in Alchemortis, like because it's inventory management. So you have like a limited board space. So you got to worry about like what size your items are, right? But then you have to worry about like what abilities are on each item. And then you have to manage like the synergies. Like you might have an item that scales off of bleed, but then it also has to scale off of like certain items being adjacent to it. So now you got to like do this like little puzzle game of like, how do I min max the placement of all these things on the board? And then, and then of course I throw in all kinds of curveballs. Like there are artifacts you can get, which are like, the permanent like relics that you just retain for the rest of your run. And they might change how an aspect of the game works. And so you've got that layer to think about. And then you've got the same kind of like min-max puzzle with Alchemy. So there's just like every single level of the game is just like, I mean, at least my goal is to make everything make you think. Like every decision you make shouldn't feel meaningless. It's like even something as simple as like, what item do I sell? Should like make you think for a little bit. Like, am I going to need that later? Is it okay if I get rid of this? Should I sell this so I can get enough currency to like buy this thing? And so I've just been really trying to focus on like, I don't want any decision to feel meaningless. I want everything to like stump you a little bit. Like, oh, I don't know what to do, or these sound equally good. I just need, and I think that's working because a lot of my playtesters are having a really fun time with the game. The downside of that, though, is that kind of makes the game a little bit less accessible to a lot of people because it's just so like dense with stuff. I think there's some things I can do with that, but yeah, I think that's been my experience. Like the reason players have enjoyed my game is because of the depth that is there, and it's one of those situations too where I think the depth gets revealed to you the more you play the game. So like as things click in your mind, you're like, oh wait, and like it opens a door, and now you understand all these different things about the game. So I think I haven't played many auto battlers, but I think that's probably a big component of it. Is like you want a high degree of depth and strategy to the game.
Yeah, what are some of those ideas that you might have for taking such a complex game and making it, at least in the intro, accessible to a wider range of players?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious things to do are just to like simplify what kinds of items that a player could come across for maybe like a tutorial run or their first run. Just kind of like very bare bones, like, bread and butter, like here's your damage ability, here's your heal ability, here's your armor ability, right? And there's like maybe some very light synergies. But honestly, it's not something that I've given too much thought to. That's going to be probably one of the next big problems is like, how do I make this less overwhelming at the start? And yeah, I don't really have many good ideas for that yet, but I think, it's probably a solvable problem. So I just need to spend some time thinking about it.
Yeah, the one example I can think of is I played He Is Coming, which I really enjoyed, and also Risk of Rain 2, I guess, does a similar thing, but they just start you with a very small pool of items, and then all the rest of the items have like a mini quest, and then you unlock them.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I think there's definitely ways. I'm sure you'll find something interesting and keep
Yeah.
it in the flavor of Alchemortis of not overwhelming the player too much because yeah, like you said, I think a huge draw like for me as a roguelike player is like how many synergies can I find? How many ways
Yeah.
can I break the game? And you're clearly setting that up. So that's really exciting. You mentioned playtesters several times here. I'm wondering if you could kind of just share a little bit, like practically, like how are you running playtesters? I mean, I know you have your YouTube channel, which I'm guessing helped you find some
Yeah.
playtesters, but yeah, what are some things you're doing to actually run these?
Yeah, so the YouTube channel was helpful, especially in the early days of Alchemortis. I already had an audience, which I could say, "Hey, here's my new game. Like, come and play test it." Right? Um, and that you can't discount how helpful that is. So I don't know what advice I could give to people to like build up an initial audience of playtesters. I kind of already started with it. So, but from there, it's just a matter of like I run the playtest for like 2 weeks usually because I have a Patreon, and so my Patreon members get a week of exclusive early access to the playtest, which is just like a nice way to reward people for supporting the development and everything, and they get to be the first ones to offer their feedback and all that stuff. And then I open it to the public, and then I invite people to come into the Discord and leave the feedback. I don't really collect feedback on any other medium except Discord, and I think that's working fine because the people that are most invested in the game are going to be the ones giving you the feedback. So they're going to join the Discord. So I don't think I'm missing anything by having Discord as like the sole platform where you can send your feedback. And then I just, I collect a bunch of feedback from the playtest. I try to categorize it all. I try to summarize it, split out like concrete tasks or things to think about. I throw it into a Kanban board that I have. And then I try to address as many of those things, especially the most pressing issues prior to running the next playtest. So what I'll do generally is I'll build out a bunch of new content. I'll fix all the most major issues from the previous playtest, and then I'll do another playtest, and then I'll reevaluate. And sometimes people will say, I like this system better, or I like it worse, or this aspect of this system is better, but this aspect is worse. And like, you just kind of like course correct over time, right? But I can't course correct until I collect that playtest feedback. So I've been trying to do playtests pretty frequently as just like check-ins to see like, am I on the right path or not? And then, yeah, it works out pretty good. So I think, and now, Alchemortis has a publisher now. So they're helping with the marketing and getting the playtest word out too. So that's going to bring in more people. It has brought in more people. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's just going to snowball now, hopefully. And we just keep collecting. I'm almost to the point where like there's so much feedback coming in now that I can't address all of this in like, you know,
Right.
5 months or whatever. But yeah, we'll
Yep.
see.
Yeah, I do want to circle back to publishers in just a second, but I had one more question on playtesting. I've heard a few devs say this kind of idea that playtesters are good at identifying problems, but bad at identifying solutions. Do you feel that tension in the feedback you receive?
Yes, that is definitely true to an extent. Especially with like people who understandably don't understand the ins and outs of the game, right? So they may raise a problem and say you should fix it this way, but of course, me being the developer, I know that if I did the fix as they said it, it would break this other system over here, or it would cause me to have to rework this system or this thing. And a lot of times, a lot of the feedback can be addressed in ways that are not obvious. So it kind of goes back to what I said. Like people will say, well, this item's too powerful or whatever. And the obvious thing to do is to just like nerf the item, right? But maybe the non obvious thing to do is just like sit on it for a little bit and see how it feels once the loot pool gets diluted with more items, right? Because then maybe it's not as like impactful relatively because you're not getting it as often. And the times that you do get it, maybe it doesn't fit into your build in that moment. So you can't use it anyway, right? So it's like, a lot of the times the fixes are just like, well, there's not a lot of content yet, or, um, you know, th- you know, bleed, which is one of the status effects of my game. It might feel weak right now simply because I haven't built enough items to support it yet, right? So it's like instead of jumping straight into like the raw number buff, I might say, no, it just needs more supporting items, right? Or it just needs to last a little bit longer, right? Like just those kinds of things often make quite a big of a difference. But generally speaking, when people say like they have a problem with the game, I take that seriously. It's just like the proposed solutions. And the other thing too is like a lot of the proposed solutions may not fit with the vision of the game. I might just be like, I don't want to do that because I don't want that for my game. Like I'll take the issue seriously, but I'm going to try to figure out a solution that works with like the vision I have for the game. Um, and try to make everyone happy.
Yeah, I think you dropped a lot of good words of wisdom there in just, taking the big picture of the developer as you consider these problems. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to wrap up with just a couple questions about publishers. I'm pretty sure that you did Gunforged self-published, but now
Yeah.
you've switched to working with a publisher. Can you just tell me a little bit about that decision?
Yeah. So I think, honestly, it's because like Alchemortis has a lot of potential, and the people who have played it are really enjoying it. And I felt like it was becoming too large of a risk that if I failed to market the game properly, like it wasn't going to get as much attention as it deserved. And so rather than taking the risk of trying to like run my own marketing and like try to hit like, market to the audience properly and all that stuff, and I would feel terrible if like I felt like this game had a lot of potential and could do really well and I just didn't do the marketing that well, right? So signing up with a publisher is kind of like a calculation of like I think that I'm going to get more sales than I otherwise would have without a publisher, because they know how to do the marketing beats and they know how to like go to all the events and they know how to talk to streamers and stuff like this. And on the flip side of that, it's like I can focus purely on the game, right? Like I can focus purely on realizing the potential that I think the game has and not worry so much about like getting the word out about it. Like I can just focus my efforts entirely on this aspect of it. So, and then of course, like there's the optionality of like, consoles in the future, that could be something that we look for or look toward doing. But yeah, it's I just one of those things where I made the calculation like I think the game is going to do better with a publisher than without.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Can you tell me a little bit about your process of just finding a publisher? Did you pitch to a lot of them? How did you actually find your publisher?
I didn't pitch to any of them. they all they all emailed me.
That's awesome.
I had like 3 or 4 publishers reach out, and I ended up going and talking with all of them, and I think 3 of them extended offers to me. And though the publisher that I ended up choosing, Feardemic, I felt that with Feardemic, like they truly did care about the game. Like my contact at Feardemic played Alchemortis like a ton. Showed me his Steam playtime and was like, yeah, this game is awesome. And I just felt so good about like working with them because they obviously cared a lot and they saw the potential in the game. And so I went with them. But yeah, it was just I didn't. It wasn't actually something that I was thinking about until I started receiving the offers, and then I started seriously thinking about it. Like, okay, is this something that I actually want to do? And it goes back to what I just said. Like, yes, I made the calculation that would be good. Honestly, I didn't think the game was even ready to start pitching to publishers. Like, I wasn't even thinking about that because I was like, this game it can't be shown yet, or like, the play tests that we're doing are kind of rough. So it's like, I don't know, maybe I should polish it a little bit more before doing the publisher pitches. And they reached out to me, so I was like, oh, I guess I'll just take this opportunity now that it's here.
Yeah, do you think for your case it was like an aspect of having some acclaim on YouTube that helped, or was it just that the right people saw the game? Kind of what do you attribute to those publishers reaching out to you so early?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know. Something must have happened because they all reached out within like a relatively short time frame of each
Interesting.
other. So it was like, I think it must have been like a YouTube video I made or something that got their attention, or I'm trying to think if anyone like played it like a streamer or anything. I don't think so, but there must have been something that happened because I don't think it's a coincidence that they all reached out in roughly the same timeline. So maybe it was just like one of my devlog videos that happened to get popular in those circles and they just found out about it. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Two more questions for you. Now that you've worked with a publisher and on your own, I know that one, it can be tough to find a publisher, and some people have that dream of getting their game funded, but also there can be a lot of fear in sharing your idea and needing to collaborate and work with someone. So now that you've kind of worked solo and with a publisher, do you think more people should put their games out there to publishers? Like, what's kind of the pros and cons maybe of the two different ways of going about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like this is the first time I worked with publishers, so I don't know if I can provide any like generalized advice. I'm still, this is still a new thing for me too, so it's like I don't really know, but I think it, I think maybe starting with the goal of having a publisher is like the wrong place to start. It goes back to what I was talking about, like with tools. It's like you have to evaluate what's good in the moment, like what's good for your game, for this game specifically, and where you're at in development. Like, do you need funding? Is that the only way you can make the game work? Then maybe that might be something you push really hard for, is finding a publisher to fund your game, right? But are you working on the game as like after your day job and like it's going really well and you have a YouTube channel that's gaining some traction? Like maybe that's not as necessary, right? Maybe you can try emailing some streamers yourself and seeing if they pick up the game, and that might just get your wish lists going really fast. Like it's one of those things where if it was me, if I'm making another game out after Alchemortis and I'm trying to evaluate, do I want a publisher? It would be like very specific to that game. I wouldn't start with, I need a publisher for this game. I would start with, let's see how the game goes. Let's look at what the money in my bank account is. And let's just play it by ear, right? Like we'll do what's needed for the game when I make that decision or whatever. So I think that's the way that I would approach it. So aside from like giving specific advice, I think maybe just like case by case basis, right? Figure out what is going to work for your game and do that.
Yeah, love that advice. Love the nuanced take. I'm sure people will have a lot to consider there. All right, let me leave you with this one final question. So, this is the Dev Dream podcast, and I made it to inspire mostly myself, but also others, by hearing about what other cool developers have going on. So, I'm curious for you, Jacob, what would you say is your game dev dream in this season of life?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not a huge dream. I just want to get Alchemortis finished and out the door, and I want to make it as good as I possibly can. And, hopefully it's successful enough that I can keep doing game development, and that's what I'm focused on right now. So I guess, yes, that is my dream. That's my focus, is get Alchemortis out the door, make it successful, make it fun, and we'll see what happens.
Well, Jacob, that's a fantastic dream. I hope you're able to make it a reality. And I also hope you hit those 50,000 copies and more.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Blake.